It is a great day to be alive, and I am so thankful for God, Jesus Christ, who lives in us. Today's video is titled, Russian Bear, Japan Bears, and the Chicago Bears Win. In this video, I also want to take the time to get into 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25. We're going to be talking about Elijah and the number 42. All this ties into this theme that God has been showing me about bears, whether it be a dream, whether it be news about a bear, or a country being represented by a bear. God has been revealing all of this to me, and I feel as though He's giving me a beautiful explanation through His Word, something to encourage and also explain why we are seeing this bear crash or this bear type market right now, and why we should not be discouraged. There is a message behind the bears. Before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing that I'm sharing is financial advice. I'm simply sharing dreams, visions, and interpretations that I feel God has given me as it relates to crypto. Now, let's get into the video. So we're going to go back to 2024. I want to show how 2024 events is going to come full circle to 2025. So I want to start here in 2024. My dream about Baltimore, Ohio, that had to do with Russia. It had to do with Putin. It had to do with me being at a train station, and I was given the date of August 6th based on a person's birthday in that dream. And in previous videos, I have explained how trains is a representation for me for a crash, trains derailing. In one of my market crash dreams, I explained how I saw a candle that turned into an arrow that was moving down so quickly that it was wobbling and shooting sparks out of the side of it as if it was about to derail. It reminded me of a train. So when I see trains, train stations, I know that has something to do with the crash. A few days before I had this Putin train station dream, I had this dream about a Monopoly board. Putting it all together, my research as it relates to this Baltimore, Ohio, brought me to understanding the connection that Baltimore, Ohio has with railroads. As it connects to the Monopoly game, the dream I had a few days before, the B&O railroad that is labeled on this game is an actual railroad. This railroad in particular, taking us back to 1929. So again, our research is taking us back to 1929, Baltimore, Ohio, looking at their connections to the railroads. This is the individual who bought the stock certificate for this railroad, this B&O railroad. He bought this stock certificate 5 days before the October 29th, 1929 market crash. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this 1929 date as it relates to other research. For whatever reason, God always brings me back to this date of October 29th, 1929, which is the date that the stock market crash took place. So once again, this dream about Putin train station, and I was given the date of August the 6th. Well, on August the 5th/6th, the Japan market crash took place simply because of the Japan carry trade. And I always say August 5th/6th simply because of the time period where you are on the map would dictate the date for that particular day. So basically, in a nutshell, the Bank of Japan decided to raise rates all of a sudden from 0 up to 0.25%. So raising the rates had an effect on the yen, and the results was the Japan carry trade crash, again, that took place on August 5th/6th. So here are our 2024 bears. The first bear has to do with Russia, because Russia is known as the bear. Again, in this dream, I was given the date of August the 6th, which was the date that the Japan carry trade happened on. And because this carry trade caused a crash to take place, that is also equal to a bear. Again, 2024 bears. Now we move on to 2025. We know that Japan got a new prime minister on October 21st of this year. The first woman to hold the position as a prime minister ever in Japan's history. Again, that was October 21st. And then I began seeing different articles about alerts going out in Japan. And this article says Japan is on alert after record-breaking waves of bear attacks. This article was dated for October 29th. Also on October 28th/29th, Trump went over to meet with Prime Minister. And that night, on the 29th, I had a dream about the mama bear and the baby bear and the 7-Up drink. If you had a chance to see a few of my last videos, you already know about this mama bear, baby bear dream and the 7-Up, and how I explained that this dream was all about God showing me a bear or a crash or a bear market. And this is one of the most recent videos where I kind of tied everything together and talked about what we're experiencing now as far as the crash that's taking place. So again, October 29th, I had this dream about the mama bear and the baby bear. And as time continued on throughout the month of November, I continued to see articles about bear attacks in Japan. Japan to send troops to help stop bear attacks. The U.S. Embassy warns Americans in Japan to stay alert for bears after 13 deadly attacks in 2025. Japan suffered deadliest month of bear attacks in history, with 7 deaths and 88 maulings in October. And then during that time, around November 21st, we heard the news that Japan okays $135 billion stimulus package to help revive its sluggish economy. And this article talks about how in recent days, investors have sold off, pushing yields higher while the yen has fallen to nearly its lowest level this year. So basically what you're seeing here is more stimulus equals higher inflation. And with higher inflation, you're looking at the yen falling. And what helps a falling yen is raising interest rates. And if this happens, this will be the same thing that we saw in 2024, which caused the carry trade to take place. So is what we're seeing now with the stimulus package for Japan, a warning of what's to come. A 2025 carry trade crash to add to what we are already seeing in the markets. Again, this reminded me of 2024. And all of the bears that we're hearing now, this historic attack of bears in Japan, is this an indication? Are these bear attacks indicators for a possible carry trade crash? Again, bear is a representation of a bear market or a crash. This brings us to Black Friday and the game between the Chicago Bears and the Eagles. And here's the last video that I did talking about this Bear versus Eagles and this date of November 28th. Here's the video where I first shared this dream about Bears versus Eagles. 2 dreams, 2 questions, 1 event. And in that video, I shared this slide, November 28th, 2025, which is Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. The Bears, which represents Russia, versus the Eagles, which represents the United States. Also in that last video, as I talked about the November 28th date, I shared this slide about November 21st and how news came out that Trump administration is insisting that Ukraine government agrees on this plan to end Russia invasion by the Thanksgiving holiday. When I saw this, I immediately thought about November 28th because that date is right after Thanksgiving. They must agree by Thanksgiving. And then after Thanksgiving, of course, the Bears versus the Eagles game took place and the Bears walked away with the win. So this win by the Bears, I looked at as an indicator. I believe that there are 2 sides to this message about Bears versus Eagles. And so the Bears winning, I look at as an indicator. And this is just one side of how I see this Bears versus Eagles. One side has to do with war. The other side has to do with the markets. As far as the win that took place on Black Friday, that for me is an indicator for the markets. As far as war goes, you have to go back and watch that video for an explanation. But I believe it's indicating something to do with World War III. Again, check out that video for details. Getting back to the market side of things. So once again, the Chicago Bears winning is an indicator. Connecting to Japan, Russia represents the bear. The Bears won on Black Friday. That is an indicator that connects to Japan and all the bear attacks that have been happening in Japan. Bringing us to the question, is it possible that this Japan carry trade is going to take place? And all of these things are indicators. Again, all of these things, the theme about bears is coming back full circle from 2024 now into 2025. This brings us to take a look at the fact that I've had 2 dreams, each having to do with 2 bears. The one from October 29th this year, I've already talked about mama bear, baby bear, but I also had one on February 1st of this year that some of you may remember. And for the sake of a title, I'm just going to call it Wilding Out and 2 Bears. And this is where I want to share 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25 as it relates to Elijah and the 42 kids. And back in February when I had this dream, I didn't really understand why I felt led to this portion of scripture about Elijah. But for whatever reason, God dropped that in my spirit. And jumping right into the story, at this point, as we get into 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 to 25, at this point in the story, Elijah has been taken up into a whirlwind by God. His mantle and a double portion of his spirit has been given to Elisha. And we know this because as Elijah goes and takes up Elijah's mantle, just as Elijah did, Elisha touched the waters of Jordan with the mantle and the waters parted. And the waters parted. What does that remind us of? Moses and the children of Israel at the Red Sea. And at this point in that story, 400 some years had gone by. Their days in bondage had ended. God came through and swept Egypt with all types of plagues. And when it was all said and done, Pharaoh kicked out the Israelites after spoiling them with all types of riches. And this is what I would like to call a wealth transfer for the children of Israel. But then Moses and the children of Israel found themselves stuck in the middle between the Egyptians, or Pharaoh and his army, and the Red Sea. And Moses held up his staff and the waters parted. In like manner, Joshua stepped into the waters. And just as God did for Moses, the waters parted. And Elijah touched the water with his mantle. And just as God did for Moses, he parted the waters. And Elijah, after he received the double portion, he took up the mantle, touched the water with the mantle. And just as God did for Moses, the water parted. And based on what God did for each of these individuals in their own particular way, I am seeing protection, provision, promise, and preparation. And preparation stands out because it is a preparing of our faith. Faith in the fact that God will protect, faith in the fact that God will keep his promise, faith in the fact that God will make provision. Again, a preparation of our faith by seeing the waters part, whether it be the Red Sea or the Jordan River. And right now, as it relates to markets, we're going to take a look at it as the Red Sea. We are in the middle of a Red Sea moment. But we're also in the middle of a Red Sea moment because God, again, is making preparations. More about that in a minute. So at this point, I knew that God was making a connection between Moses and the children of Israel and Elijah and Elisha. Now getting into 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 to 25. Again, Elijah has touched the waters of Jordan. The waters have opened up. He has walked through. And the scripture says, as Elijah left towards Bethel, little children came up and mocked him. Go up, thou bald head. Go up, thou bald head. And Elijah turned to them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came 2 she-bears out of the woods and tear 42 children of them. Now, earlier in the video, I shared how this Bible story came to mind when I had my very first 2-bear dream in February the 1st. Very quickly, this dream started out with me watching a circle of kids. And in the middle of this circle stood 2 kids, one calling out the other and then cracking jokes on them. And I saw about 3 rounds of this. I also saw the other kid feeling bad, looking sad simply because the other kid was cracking jokes on them. And then I saw adults standing around watching and laughing as well. At this point, I had seen enough. I was in the middle of correcting the parents who stood around laughing instead of being an example. And as I'm talking, I see a bear approaching. The setting of this dream was outside. So as we're running from one bear outside, we went inside of a house and we saw another bear. To hear more about this dream, I will put the link in the description box. But for the most part, what I saw going on within this circle with these 2 kids standing there, one kid cracking jokes on the other kid, reminded me of the show Wild 'N Out. The kid in the dream was wilding out on the other kid, and 2 bears appeared. And getting back to 2 Kings 2, verses 23 through 25, we see that 42 kids were wilding out on Elijah, and 2 bears appeared. And what did not come to me earlier this year in February was take a look at the number 42. I saw the similarities in the fact that I saw 2 bears in this particular dream, and then there were 2 bears in this particular Bible story. But I never thought to look at the number 42. And as I began to look at the number 42, I began to see why God allowed me to see those similarities between Moses and the Israelites and Elijah and Elisha. When it came down to God demonstrating his power, protection, provision, promise, and preparation for his people. So getting into it, the number 42 represents the journey in the wilderness for the Israelites. They went through 42 encampments from Egypt to the promised land. This means that 42 represents a long period of testing. It represents purification. It represents transition from bondage to freedom. The number marks the difficult path before the blessing. It marks the difficult path before the blessing. Biblically, 42 represents the climax of trouble or rebellion before God steps in with judgment or to rescue or bring about new beginnings. Again, the number 42 represents the climax of trouble before God steps in to rescue and bring about new beginnings. Again, Moses and the children of Israel is that example. He rescued them from bondage. He rescued them from the Egyptians by opening up the Red Sea. And he brought about new beginnings as they set forward to go to the promised land. A climax of rebellion before God steps in and brings about judgment. The Egyptians were judged. God brought about plagues in the form of judgment, which led to the freedom for the Israelites. The number 42 represents a set period of trial, a measured time of evil or rebellion, God's patience reaching its limit, a moment before redemption or judgment, transition from suffering to deliverance. Again, it marks the end of trouble and beginning of God's intervention. A mathematical way of looking at 42 is 6 times 7. 6 is a number of humanity and imperfection. 7 is a number of completion or divine order. 42 represents the 42 generations from Abraham to Jesus. This represents the entire time frame leading up to the Messiah. 42 equals the end of waiting. 42 equals the moment right before salvation arrives. And this brings us back to 42 being symbolic of trial, trouble, or judgment. Taking us to the book of Revelations, chapter 11, verse 2, chapter 13, verse 5, talking about the 42 months or the 3.5 years, which will be the period in which the beast or the Antichrist has authority before God ends it. The message out of all of this: we are at a climax where God is about to rescue us out of troubles, marking new beginnings, talking about the wealth transfer. While at the same time, God will bring judgment upon the rebellious people, those that the Bible referred to as being wicked, because the wealth of the wicked will be given to God's righteous. Again, we're talking about the wealth transfer. This bear market, whether it's a bear crash only or a bear crash going into a bear market, presenting two bears, we have to see this as God's way of protecting us, setting up provision for us, fulfilling his promise to us, and also preparing us. Again, that preparation has to do with faith. God sent those two she-bears to protect Elijah. God gave me the first dream with those two bears to warn us about what was coming. He sent me the second bear dream to warn us about what was coming, the mama bear and the baby bear dream. This bear crash / bear market is needful. It is an indicator of what's to come. What's to come? 42. Rescue and new beginnings, as well as judgment. God knows how much it hurts to take a look at our portfolio during this Red Sea moment time. But how else will our low buy orders be filled if the two bears don't come? He's given us warning. He's given us preparation. We knew the bears were on the way, not to harm us, but to protect us. And as long as we hold on to the promise, we, like Moses, are able to stand with our hands lifted and watch God part this Red Sea moment. Why? Because we know that he's going to rescue us and bring us a new beginning. So don't be afraid of the Red Sea moment, because there's another Red Sea moment where God is going to prove himself. He's going to make sense of his promise to us. But we have to keep the faith in the midst of all of these bad things that are around us, whether it's coming from Japan, whether it's coming out of Russia, whether it's horrible news about over and over bear attacks that are being taking place. These bears are here. It is part of God's provision. It is a part of him completing his promise, and it's also a part of preparation. Waiting for this wealth transfer has been a long period of testing. It has been a period of purification, but it's also a period of transitioning from bondage to freedom. One more thing that I want to share, as I was thinking about preparing this video and thinking about the message behind the number 42 and all of this about the bears, I was cleaning up and I came across this paper, my daughter's paper, on the floor. I talked about my daughter before and how she has this diagnosis of autism. And I remember many months ago, and I want to say Brother Brandon or Brother Keith, or they both came on about either the same day or a day apart. But one of them was talking about how God is going to use those who have been diagnosed with autism to prophesy. And of course, this really hits home for me as I'm praying for my child and her deliverance from all of this. But I also understand that God will use whomever he will. And for me, this is one of those moments. And so I'm cleaning up and I'm picking up her paper off of the floor. And it was the backside of this paper that really caused me to smile. I picked this paper up off the floor, and this is what I saw on the back. This part, the back was facing up. When I walked up to it, I saw this message: the sea red. Remind you, I was thinking about the message for this video. I was thinking about Moses. I was thinking about the connection between Elijah and Elisha and how God parted the waters for them like he parted the waters for Moses. And when I walked up to pick up this paper and I saw this written on the back, the C red. Yes, it's the wrong C, it's SEE, but I knew the message, and this was confirming the fact that I needed to make this video about the Red Sea moment. The number 42 and the connection to the Bears. Again, as we look at the market side of this as it relates to the wealth transfer, the Bears are an indication of God's protection, preparation, and provision for his people. The current situation that we're in is needful. It is meant, it has purpose. Be encouraged. We are so very close. That is all that I have for this video. Until the next one, God bless.